it seems like most of the women who get out take many, many, many years to work through this idea that they are not going to go to hell. It seems to be, I didn't realize that it would be so ingrained that leaving would be, that would be like almost the number one concern. It's right along there with, I will lose my family. But it seems that most women who do leave have family on the outside who often will help them in some way. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think now that would be more prevalent now than say when I left. There would be more people out because there's been more years for people to leave and be able to. When I left, I didn't know of anyone that could help me.
And I think that's probably true. And I have heard that there are changes since the whole issue, the legal issue with Warren Jeffs. What I am hearing is that things are changing.
Out of necessity and for no other reason. Legal necessity.
Well, legal necessity. And the people, it seems like the women within polygamy are talking amongst themselves a little more, and so they just say, yes, things are changing, we just don't know what's changing or how it's changing. We just notice a difference.
And that's good if it's bringing good changes. But if the changes aren't something that, if they do it for fear of the law, they make those changes for fear of the law, they can't be permanent. They would have to be changes that make a permanent.
These are changes
long-term.
amongst, it seems, what I've heard is amongst the members themselves.
That's good.
You know, the outside contact is allowed more.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So
that's good.
Yeah.
What about the free agency? Women, we know this culture, Mormon culture, polygamy culture, all the same thing, preaches, pontificates on free agency. Yet when someone tries to practice that free agency, they are shunned. They have huge repercussions. Have you got some information on that?
Well, I actually brought something that when I read it, it was like, oh my gosh, they're talking about my journey. So I can tell you a little bit about this piece I read, and it was in a psychological journal. Someone had a feminist writer had written about do people really know if they have free choice? And it was about, do women, I'll give a little background. Her topic was around, are we essentially, do we have essential parts of our nature? And are men and women, I don't know if you've heard of the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus?
I've heard of it, yes. Okay. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
So if you think along those lines, an essentialist view would be that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that we act totally different because of our gender. Where there's another point of view that says maybe we're a lot more similar than different, and that the differences aren't innate, that they're socially learned. And so one of the examples I often use when people say to me something about, well, you know, extol the virtues of women, I talk about when slavery, and I don't even pretend to know a lot about this topic, but a little bit about it, because Canadians, by the way, study American history as well as Canadian history. So we know a fair amount, or we've learned a fair amount about the slaves and the Civil War. So what I say is, you know, what if you had the situation where a slave was treated really, really well, in fact, so well that he really felt like he had complete freedom. His family was treated well. His wife, he had some land of his own, or some things he was allowed to do on his own. And so the idea of leaving the master or the family that that owned him, and American history sort of supports there were cases like this, where he said, you know, I don't feel like a slave, and I'm going to stay, he or she. And so he or she became so absorbed in the belief that this was the best life, and that any other life was not suitable to him, that he didn't see his slavery as slavery. And so he would become an advocate for his own slavery. And so
it's kind of a twisted back turn into it, isn't it?
It is. So the article I read here simply was about, imagine a scenario where women have begun to recognize that they've been marginalized, and they started to assert a little bit of their own self and say, you know, I want some of the equal rights, and I want a little bit of liberty, and they become a little more conscious, and then the men whom they're associated with start to get a little bit afraid of this idea of these women are becoming more conscious, a little more awake. And so what they do, if you're a member of the long dominant male group that had been in charge of all these women, the first thing you might do in this society as a group is you would start to tell them how who they are is intrinsic, their way of being. So a woman's natural state is to be kind and generous and giving and motherly, and you're the perfect, men don't raise children as well as women do, and men can't do what women can do. And so sort of the conspiracy is to convince women that they are good at a particular thing, and when they come to believe that they are better at, women are better at intuition and mothering and taking care of others, then they will come to believe this so deeply that they will stand up and defend the men, that the men get to have all the power. And we women, we have this job.
So they'll vote against themselves.
They won't see it.
Yeah.
They absolutely won't see it.
That happens.
And brainwashing and cults do that.
Yeah, they did that in the early Mormon, when the vote came. Utah was one of the first states to give the women the vote, and that was so the women would vote the way a man has 12 wives, those 12 women would vote the way the man told him to vote. And that's the only reason they got the vote. Well, we are ready to open up the telephone lines if you have calls, questions or comments that you would like to ask our guest. We're asking our callers to please respect our guest tonight and the topic that we're discussing. Our guest is Terri Scoville, and she is doing a research paper on women's rights and polygamy, and we would like to have our viewers call in and keep on topic. If you have another question that is off topic, you can email them to us or call in another show, but please stay on topic when you call in tonight. Okay, we're going to take a call from Douglas from Murray in line 1. Hello, Douglas.
Hello, how are you tonight?
Very good. You're on the air.
Joseph Smith, as he moved across the country with the church, when he reached Nauvoo, he was the head of the militia, he was the head of the government, he was the military leader, he was the president of the church, and there were times when some of the general authorities and many of the people of the church were beginning to become a little bit dissident against some of the doctrines that Joseph had introduced. And so he would bring about a new doctrine, and polygamy was one of those. He was a power-hungry guy. It wasn't necessarily money, but he was power-hungry. When they reached Utah, my family have the name of Allred, and they're from Delta and Ephraim and different places, and there was polygamy in my background. But I could see where Joseph Smith introduced new doctrines to regain control of the church, the whole church. Do you feel that there was that kind of control and power-mongering by Joseph Smith? That's basically my question, is did you see that kind of thing happening?
Well, in my opinion, I believe that Joseph Smith had a very, very large ego. He was very charismatic, so he was able to convince people of changes that he wanted to make. And some people call them revelations. Some people call them doctrine, revelations, and some people call them just outright ego and lies, and everyone is entitled to their belief. And some people believe one and some people believe another. By the way, I was going to tell you that there are a number of Allreds that moved north to Canada during the time that polygamy had been outlawed in Utah. So I'm very familiar with the name of Allred. Many people, at least one family moved north to Canada.
It's a very popular name.
Yes. Joseph Smith was someone, even his own wife, Emma, had a very difficult time with polygamy.
Emma,
I don't think she really believed in it at all. She didn't even know about many of the wives that Joseph had taken.
Right.
Isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's my understanding. It's I know I didn't say this to begin with, but I was raised Mormon and left the Mormon church about 15 years ago, and there was a lot I never did know. So I was not aware until I started reading outside material that Joseph Smith had wives, had taken, well, the term wife is very liberal. He had secret ceremonies where he was united with other women. Mm-hmm. Despite Emma's objection, and it was done in secret.
Even more than 30.
Right, he had 34 total wives.
My two of my 4 sons, and I have left the Mormon church to become born again of the Spirit evangelical. And we're the only ones in 8 generations coming from Ohio, from Kirtland, who ever left the church to truly become born again Christians. And it's been, there's a lot of our family and a lot of our relatives that either fell away with polygamy and different things or have stayed with the church and believe that they can become gods and goddesses someday.
Okay, Douglas.
Those kinds of doctrine.
We've got other calls coming in. We do appreciate your call and your input.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks. Good night. The question I would like to ask you, Terri, is you have asked your interviewees if there's any redeeming quality in polygamy. Tell our viewers how you asked the question and what kinds of responses you've had.
Okay. So my one major and main question to begin every interview has to do with simply is the question of what is your experience of leaving polygamy? And I just say whatever you want to say from there, and go ahead and express yourself, and then I ask questions depending on which direction they go. And when the interview is over, and I thought these interviews would take an hour and a half to 2 hours. Well, they've been 2.5 to 4 to 6 hours because
there's so much.
There's just so much there, and they do want to talk about it. But the very last question I have asked every single person is there any redeeming quality about or of the practice of polygamy? And by redeeming quality, I just mean that, sometimes even though you might run into a person who does something to hurt you, they have characteristics that make them decent people in other ways. Mm-hmm. So that's a redeeming quality. It's a quality that might redeem them even though you may not agree with, in certain areas. Mm-hmm. So specifically, I've asked these women, does polygamy have any redeeming qualities? And without exception and without hesitation, it has been a resounding no. No, polygamy has nothing about it.
None of the women that you've interviewed have ever said there is a redeeming quality in polygamy.
Not one. Some of them say, well, the people in polygamy, and I said, no, I'm not talking about the people you love, because we all know that the people you love might have qualities, even though they are trying to get you to live this law. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the principle of polygamy, the law of polygamy. Mm-hmm. Is there anything about that lifestyle, and those laws you had to live, and they think about it. Some of them will think about it and go, oh, well, no, if you mean just polygamy.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
And I'd like to challenge our viewers tonight, especially those who have come out of polygamy. I know a lot of people in polygamy groups watch the show. But if there are ladies that have left polygamy and you would like to call in and weigh in your own personal answer to her question, we would love to hear from you. Are there any redeeming qualities in the practice of polygamy itself? And we're not talking about your loved ones. I still have a lot of family in polygamy, and I love them. They're wonderful people, and there are wonderful people in the groups.
Well, and these wonderful people have come out of polygamy that I have talked to.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I came across another, and this is regarding the Canadian court case, the polygamy laws that they're dealing with, and they're taking affidavits from several different people in the research that's going on, whether or not to make polygamy legal in Canada. And one of the affidavits they took was from an Oregon nurse practitioner, and she filed an affidavit after years of treating women in polygamous marriages, and she says that they are more likely, polygamous women, are more likely to be depressed, to suffer from anxiety, and to have low self-esteem. She said that the women she's treated lead her to believe that such lifestyles are harmful. Would you agree with that in the women that you have interviewed? Would you agree that polygamy is harmful in any respect?
Well, actually, and this is taking it back to another question you said, but also expanding on it in that way. What I discovered in the interviews is a number of the women left because they were, it started because they were physically ill. One woman was nearly dying. Another one couldn't eat, like she was just physically sick. And one woman was near death. In fact, she had several children. I don't remember how many, 7, 8 children. And she was in bed for almost 2 years. And in asking her about that, she said that she was just sick at heart, but it had manifested in her body, which is really interesting. And
Yes.
and the part that has come out of that is most of the women I've talked to since have become healers in some way or another. They found a way to become healers themselves. So either they find a ministry to heal the soul, they've become some kind of a therapist or a health professional to heal the body and the soul. It's just amazing to me how many of them have come out to heal the body as well as the soul, because they get so physically sick in that journey as they're beginning to get ready to leave, as they're starting to think about leaving. Their body tells them something, and then it takes a long time for them to go from the body to the brain, where they can form this, I need to leave.
It's really a long process. It's a very long and difficult process. We have an off-the-air question, fits right into this conversation. How does a woman begin to create an identity after leaving polygamy? That is, and I'm sure you've had some interesting women you've interviewed, their journey.
There are so many different ways.
Yeah.
But it seems that most of them go into almost a cocoon for a while. You know, the butterfly, you know, the larva goes into a cocoon, and in the cocoon you're wrapped in yourself. And the world is outside, and there's just you. And that's like being with yourself. That's just being with you and herself, and trying to sort of let the old go and take a little bit at a time of the new. But almost without exception, these women talked about this cocooning place. this cocooning stage, where they couldn't just jump into something else. In fact, most women
That's
who
very
did
frightening.
jump into something else jumped into something just as abusive.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so true. And from my own experience, and as I has expressed to you, I did not find my identity, my true identity, until I found my value, because I had no value as I was growing up, and I was repeatedly told that, and I really didn't find my value until I realized God valued me. And once I knew that I had value in Christ, that I had value and that God did love me, that's when I really began to heal. Before that,
You
I had
cannot
no
give
healing.
what you do not have. So if you don't have any self-love and you don't have any self-care practices, how do you teach that to any or give that to anyone else?
When you're raised believing that God is going to hate you for doing the very thing that you did to survive, and you're living on the hatred of God, then you find out the opposite is true. It's absolutely amazing. And then He gives you the love, and your value, my value just exploded at that point. Before that point, I didn't have that. All right, let's take a couple phone calls if we've still got some time. We have line 1, Kathy from Pleasant Grove. Hi, Kathy.
Okay.
What's your question?
Hi, Doris. Here's my question. I'm wondering, how has leaving a polygamous relationship affected the sons and the daughters who have come with the mother who has left?
The family that leave with the mother.
Yeah, but I want both sons and daughters addressed, please.
Well, that would vary according to the family and according to the state of the mother when she leaves. And sometimes, in rare incidents, even the mother and the father will leave together. But usually it's the mother with the children. And it is quite a process of healing for the children as well. Probably not as difficult, but they are leaving family behind. They're leaving the only life they have and the only friends they had as well. So it is also a process, but they seem to adapt a little bit easier into a new life than adults do. Getting back into a school they've never been into before, public school, for instance, and being able to play freely with neighbors and people that don't believe the way they believe. But it is a healing process. Have you?
It is, and one of the comments I would make to you, Kathy, is that having interviewed women who have had children, it seems like that the girls tend to have a tougher time. Again, they've been brainwashed, so have the sons, but the girls still have the tougher time, it seems, because the men have been told they do have some value, and the women and the girls have told they do not.
That's so true.
And often you will see them they don't fit in the outside world and they don't fit in the inside world, so they're in that in-between stage themselves, that in-between place. They're referred to on the outside as the polyg kid, even though they no longer belong in polygamy.
Do they come to appreciate their mother?
Some do, some don't. That's my research is showing that it depends on how close they were to their mother to begin when they left. Not all appreciate their mother leaving.
That's right, they don't.
Even if they stay out.
The children normally, if they're not real young children, they've been brainwashed to believe the only way to God, the only way to please God is to be in that group and to live that lifestyle. And so when their mother takes them out, they can be very angry with her.
How about 10 years later?
Kathy, can I ask you a question? If you know, or are you experiencing this yourself?
Oh no, I'm not.
Okay.
But
If you know of
one
anyone,
my son's friends' mother had recently left polygamy. This was 10 or 15 years ago, and had 7 young children. And of course, they were very poor. She was very courageous to do it. And I'm just wondering, on the average, if the children eventually come to see what a sacrifice their mother has made and what good has come of it.
that would depend, Kathy. We really wouldn't know. It's individual.
Psychologists have a saying when we're asked this kinds of question, which Doris just reiterated, and the word is it depends. So every case, every single person will be different, depending on what they went through and where they want to go. And every individual has their own experience of polygamy, whether they came out as a family or not.
And it might take even years later, and it may yet happen even years later. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Bye. Well, we're getting toward the end of our show. We have very quickly, Terri, I want to thank you for coming and sharing. Can you say in 20 seconds or less what your personal opinion and reaction of polygamy is?
Well, I come from an LDS home where we weren't really allowed to speak about polygamy, and even though I had questions, I just simply couldn't seem to get the answers I wanted, and it would often come out as, we'll discuss, God will take care of it, it will be discussed in the afterlife, let's just not talk about it, let's not discuss it. But my opinion has always been the same. I can't see any, I didn't see any redeeming qualities of polygamy, although, and that's the reason I asked that question, is because as an LDS child, I was told, LDS Mormon, mainstream Mormon, I was told that there were advantages.
Yeah.
And the
list
list was fairly large.
Yeah.
And and one thing I will say is I'm still looking for participants so if there are any women who have left polygamy, specifically women who were sister wives in the polygamist, I am still looking for people who would like to tell their story.
So if you're interested, you can email us tv@aboutpolygamy.com, and I will connect you with Terri. Thank you, Terri, for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
It was recently, I was contacted by someone who wanted information about leaving, and I asked her if there was something that would keep her from leaving, and she said the two heartbreaking things we've talked about tonight. First, she didn't want to lose her family, and second, she didn't want to go to hell. And beginning with Joseph Smith on down tonight, that is a lie, a dirty lie from hell that absolutely is not true. If celestial marriage is required, then God is a deceiver. Jesus died on the cross in vain, and we're all lost in our sins and condemned forever, because Jesus Christ died on the cross to accomplish what you think celestial marriage is going to do. But celestial marriage cannot wipe out one single sin that you have ever committed. All of that was done on the cross, and that's where you're going to find everything that you're living celestial marriage to do. I want to thank you for watching the show. Good night.